The Memphis Grizzlies pick up Cedric Coward out of Washington State in the first round of the draft Wednesday night. Grizzlies traded with the Portland Trail Blazers to get it done. Blazers picked Coward at number 11, traded him to the Grizzlies, and in return, the Grizzlies drafted Chinese center Yang Hansen for the Blazers at pick 16, and will also send a 2028 first-round pick and 2 second-round picks to the Blazers. He's got a phenomenal game, especially on the defensive end, and a sweet shooting stroke. As for his mentality, he says he fits perfectly with the Grizzlies.
They get after it every night, and I think I fit with that mold perfectly. We get after it every night. We don't take days off. We don't take time off. And like you said, like John said, actually, he's fine in the West and going with that mentality in terms of like, we're the best out there. We're the best team out there. Nobody can mess with us, and we're going to come after you and try to take your heads off.
There's nothing he couldn't theoretically be able to contribute to in the NBA in a real role while taking nothing off the table. We don't see some area that would be a glaring weakness that couldn't be improved. I think there's a foundation of what could be a very interesting, versatile, multi-positional defender who could end up playing different types of roles offensively.
All right, DeMichael, the Grizzlies move up to get Cedric Coward. You heard what he had to say. He's fine. He's already saying fine in the West.
Yeah, he's calling shots already.
He might be a couple of years behind in terms of what the mentality of the Grizz might be. What is your evaluation of what the Grizzlies did in the first round?
This was the type of pick they needed to make if they were going to keep the pick. I know there was a lot of conversation about the idea that are the Grizzlies going to keep this pick? Are they going to trade it for a veteran player that fits closer to the timeline of Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., whatever the case may be. But in this case, when you evaluated this draft class, you say if the Grizzlies keep this pick, they need a versatile wing who can particularly change the game on the defensive end. You look at what the Grizzlies have. You got Ja Morant. You got Jalen Wells, who we heard Zach Kleiman basically say that a key part in the Desmond Bane trade was the fact that Jalen Wells is someone that they're starting to really trust. So he's kind of positioned himself as part of the future as well. Then you got Jaren Jackson Jr., you got Zach Edey. You got one spot right in between those 4 positions. That's where you need that big wing who can play on both ends. Cedric Coward, if you look at his stats, you look at the highlight tapes, you look at what we've seen, over the course of his collegiate career. Yeah, he played at Eastern Washington, then he played a couple games at Washington State. So that's kind of the question mark here. But the most impressive thing about this guy is the measurables that go with those counting numbers. You look at the highlights there, you're looking at a guy he has a 7'2.5" wingspan. That's only like 3 inches shorter than Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yeah.
So he has this long, massive wingspan that puts him in the, from a measurable standpoint, in the conversation with guys like Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and those are the type of players that the Grizzlies have been trying to covet, but they haven't been able to get. So it's like, okay, we can't get one of the guys who are already in the league. Let's go try to find our own. And that's what they're hoping Cedric Coward can be.
Yeah, I think we've been talking about unicorns in the league.
Yeah.
And normally you think of that as like the 7'1" guy.
Yep.
Jaren Jackson Jr., we call it unicorn.
Yep.
Kristaps Porzingis was called a unicorn when he came out and initially went to the Knicks. I think what we're starting to see is that these wings are the unicorns in the league now. These guys who are long, lanky, rangy, can shoot, and especially in Cedric's case, can play really good defense. They're looking for their own version of first of all, they're kind of trying to get a replica of Jalen Wells, for one, right?
Yeah.
In some certain aspects. They want a Jalen Williams. They want a Jaden McDaniels from the Minnesota Timberwolves. And it seems like they feel pretty good about Cedric in saying that, he could potentially rise to the occasion and be kind of that level of player. And it was kind of interesting as you were listening to Zach Kleiman, he was very careful to not put the world on Cedric's shoulders right now. He was kind of playing both sides of the fence. I mean, he could turn into this, but we can't say that.
That's how you got to do it.
But you're not moving up 5 picks, giving up a future first rounder if you don't think that this guy could really be in your rotation moving forward.
Man, they got to think a lot of them, right? You gave up a future first in addition to the number 16 pick and 2 future second round picks as well. But again, when you talk about just the fact that I know a lot of people are going to talk about the idea that they should have traded the pick for a more veteran player. what's the next best thing to do if you can't go out and get that veteran player? You say, okay, let's get a guy in this draft who kind of has some of those same, measurables, has some of the same skills that those guys have. And if you look at, what Cedric Coward has done in his college career, he mimics, some of those things from a skill set standpoint. But then when we talked to him, on the conference call on yesterday, the thing that stood out to me is he kept talking about the defensive mentality. We didn't have to bring up the grit and grind for him to say the word grit on the conference call. So he already gets it.
He's up here. His head's up here. He already understands what he's got going on.
Yeah, and that is going to be big because you talk about a guy who's going to come in now. He already has the idea that I'm going to do the dirty work. We got Ja Morant, we got Jaren Jackson Jr. They're not going to ask me to score 20 a game, as a rookie and put the ball in my hands and say, hey, go, do whatever you want. Yep. They're going to say, hey, you're going to have more of a controlled role, but on the defensive end, change the game. And now, in a way, you get Jalen Wells some help. And it's funny that Jalen Wells is getting help because he would have had the help if he would have stayed another year at Washington State, being that both of these dudes went to Washington State just a year apart.
Yeah, so, for those who are unfamiliar with Cedric Coward's story, started Division III, went to Willamette University, I believe, only played a year there, then went to Division II at Eastern Washington, and then went to Washington State, only got to play six games at Washington State before he hurt himself with a shoulder injury, and he says he is fully healthy. What's interesting, I think, about his journey to the Grizzlies, too, is that he had his workout with the Grizzlies on Monday, and part of that is because Grizzlies didn't have a first-round pick before a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. He talked about what that workout looked like and why he felt like the Grizzlies would be attractive to him on both sides because of the workout he had. Take a listen.
We got after it. It was very competitive. We did a series of drills, just showcasing my skills, my talents, and then especially my grit and my, just being able to stay the course and be competitive no matter if I was making shots, missing shots. And honestly, like I said before, not only talking to the guys in the front office, but on the court with the guys, it just felt natural. It felt like people who wanted to get better, felt like people who were pushing me to get better. And there was a little ish talking in there, so that always helps to keep the fun aspect.
So, DeMichael, in that he mentions kind of like what you were saying. There's some grit in there. There was some grind in there. Yep. There's a little ish talking in there. Yeah. But I think the biggest thing that stands out is to him, and he says it out of his own mouth, is it felt natural. It felt right. What do you think about the fit that he kind of has when you do have to go through some of these workouts and you're trying to figure out if you do belong in an organization?
Yeah, as a player, you're looking for an organization that, one, believes in you, that has that confidence that you could be the player that you feel like you could be. And when you listen to him talk about his strengths as a player, it almost feels like exactly what the Grizzlies have said to us since the season ended on what they're trying to do. You listen to Zach Kleiman, the words that he kept saying, in different ways, was just how the Grizzlies are trying to retool this roster around Jaren Jackson Jr. and Ja Morant. It's not necessarily a rebuild or anything like that. It's like, no, we're looking at this and we're being honest with the assessment. With Ja Morant and Desmond Bane in the backcourt, there was a limit defensively. That's just the reality of it. There was a limit. So guess what? Now you got Jalen Wells, who has a lot of potential on the defensive end. You put Cedric Coward out there. Now you got another guy who has a lot of potential on the defensive end. To go with Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey, and now you put all these guys with good defensive measurables around Ja Morant. And now you're in a situation where it feels like, to the Grizzlies' standpoint, that this is closer to what a championship identity for this organization will look like than what they previously had.
Yeah, and we still haven't talked about Vince Williams. We still haven't talked about Gigi Jackson, who could emerge defensively, but is an offensive weapon. Grizzlies still have 2 picks tonight in the second round. You mentioned the Desmond Bane trade. We're going to get into that here in just a moment.